Welcome to the first seminar of the Flyin Miata Summer Camp 2025. My name is Keith Tanner, and today I'm going to talk about brakes. This is going to be in the same sort of format as our Facebook Live videos or our FM Live videos that we do all the time. The big bonus is that now we have an actual live audience full of real meat people. This is going to be great. If you have questions at any point in this, please feel free to put your hand up, interrupt me. Well, maybe not interrupt me, but put your hand up because having some interaction is going to make this so much more interesting, both for you and for me as we work through this system. Okay, so brakes. Obviously, brakes are pretty important because they're the thing you go to when everything else has gone wrong. So they have to be something that you can depend on. They have to be something that worked the first time. They have to be something that works the 50th time. They have to be something that works when it's cold, when it's hot. They have a pretty tough job, honestly. And that job is effectively turning kinetic energy, speed, into thermal energy, heat. That's effectively their job. And then they have to get rid of that heat to allow you to do it again and again and again and again. And there's three basic aspects to braking performance that people care about, or that you will probably want to care about. One is the single stop distance. How short can you stop when you're trying to do a minimum distance stop, minimum effort, or maximum effort stop? What is the maximum you can pull out of that? The other is the second one is how does it deal with heat? How does it deal with repeated stops? If you're running a track day, you certainly know about that. You're hitting those brakes over and over and over again, pumping heat into the system. So the ability to deal with heat under hard use is the second aspect of braking. And the third one is feel. How does it feel underfoot so that you can control them properly, so that you feel reassured when you're coming barreling into a high-speed corner and you step on the brakes at the last moment. You want to feel reassured that, yes, the thing will actually stop, and that's where the feel comes into. So we'll start with the first one, single stop performance, and then I'll get into basically why you might choose different brakes based on these attributes. So we will get into why there are so many options on the market. Our brake systems are one of the most complex offerings we have in terms of mixing and matching and the components and the number of levels we offer, and that is true of other vendors as well. So there's a lot to choose from. So this will hopefully give you the information you need to get the right setup for you. So single stop. How do you get the shortest single stop? And the answer is by the best tires you can, because the tires are what stop the car. All the brakes can do is fail to fully use your available traction. And where that really comes into play is in your brake proportioning. Now, all of those of you with 2001 to 2005 sport cars or NCs and NDs, you guys can sit back and relax because your car takes care of that for you. It's not your problem. Your cars have electronic brake distribution. They are constantly in real time adjusting the proportioning for the minimum stopping distance, so you're good. Those of you with less sophisticated vehicles, some of the earlier ones, all the NAs, most of the NBs, rely on a proportioning valve, and that is basically as you stop, and anyone who's ridden a bike knows this, as you stop, the weight gets transferred forward. The amount of weight that gets transferred forward depends on a number of things like your wheelbase, your center of gravity, the amount of traction, but effectively what's going on is weight is going forward, more weight on the front wheels, less weight in the rear wheels. Like I said, anyone who's ridden a bike as a kid knows this. You can lock up the back wheel and do a big skid. Super fun. Not super fun in a car. If those rear brakes lock up when you're at maximum braking, that's very unstable. You're liable to loop and have a bad day. So the brake proportioning system needs to be designed to feed more and more brake into the front wheels the harder you step on the brakes. Does that make sense? Basically, the harder you're braking, the more weight goes on those front wheels, the more brake torque needs to go on the front relative to the rear, so more pressure has to go to the front. So the way the earlier cars do this, they have a proportioning valve. And we've done a number of videos, if you look on our channel, on the ins and outs of actual proportioning, but basically what this is just a little device that ideally would be a nice curve, but the way they're really done is it's a little valve that opens at a certain pressure, and so you have equal pressure front and rear at a certain point, and then it drops off the rear at beyond that point. That's what's actually adjusting your proportioning. The early cars especially had a lot of front bias. That means that they put most of the pressure on the front brakes all the time, which meant you always want to lock the front brakes first because of stability. but Mazda was very conservative on the earlier cars. They got a little less conservative with the later ones, but still they always biased it a lot towards the front. And so if you make changes to your cars with sticky tires, with different brakes, you're driving on different surfaces, you can get more single stop performance by optimizing that front to rear bias. And the easiest way to do that is to install an adjustable proportioning valve. It's basically just a valve with a little knob on the top. That knob determines where it starts dropping the rear pressure, and it basically allows you to put more pressure in those rear brakes, make more use of those rear brakes, and get you a shorter stopping distance. It also comes into the design of the brake system. If you put an enormous big brake kit that develops a huge amount of brake torque on the front wheels and you don't do anything on the back, then you're not getting any real braking work out of the back of your car. You've lost 50% of your tires. So when you're installing a big brake kit or you're upgrading your brakes, you want to make sure you upgrade both front and rear so that they stay relatively balanced. That's why you'll notice that we tend to push four-wheel brake kits on our site. And the reason for that is we want to make sure that you're not just putting a big shiny setup on the front because it looks cool, and then discovering that you just can't stop the car anymore because the front brakes lock up immediately and the rears don't do anything. On my race car, I have the proportioning valve available to the driver. It's actually, if you look at the center console, it's right in front of the gear shift, so I can adjust the brake bias for the conditions of the day. And it also freaks out your passenger really badly if you start turning that knob in between stops on the first lap. But that is the key to single stop performance. Nail the brake proportioning. You want the rear brakes almost at the point of lockup when the front brakes do lock, and that way you can actually feel. It almost feels like you've thrown a drogue chute out of the back of the car. It's more stable. There's more braking going on in the back. It feels good. All right, and now the many stop situation. And this is what actually drives big brake kits. This is why you see big brakes on race cars. Not always why you see big brakes on street cars, but in theory it's why you should see them. And that is the capacity to deal with heat. Because all of that energy that you're getting rid of, all of that, that 100-mile-an-hour speed, those hundreds of horsepower that you've poured into the drivetrain to accelerate has to be turned into heat. And then we have to get rid of that heat. And so that's why big brakes are physically big. There's mass in here. They're made of cast iron. They can absorb a lot of heat during that stopping incident. And then they need to radiate it away again. They need to get rid of the heat so you can do it again and again and again. So you need big rotors. You need rotors with a lot of mass in them. You need big pads with a lot of mass in them. The calipers have to be able to shed heat. The brake fluid has to be rated high enough to deal with the temperatures you're dealing with. And ideally, you've got some brake ducting that will help funnel cold air into these things and get the heat away. And there's also ducting inside the rotors. If you can have a look here later, you look at these rotors, you'll see that they all have different designs of the actual fins inside, because these things are basically internal fans. They are pulling air through the rotor to try to cool both sides of it, to try to get rid of that heat that's in there. So that is the biggest reason why you are going to put a big brake kit, especially on a race car, is just to deal with the heat. And again, my particular race car, it's got, it can put 500 horsepower of acceleration down, so it needs a lot of brake to go in there. And on early Miatas especially, you don't have a lot of tire or wheel to hide this big monster in, so this can actually be a real challenge. I did a whole series of videos again on our YouTube channel. There's one on brake ducting, which is quite popular because that is the easiest and cheapest way to improve your heat management, is to just get cold air into the right part of the brakes, which is the center of it's the backside, but the center of the rotor, so the rotor can pull it through the vanes. How to do that, it's by far the most budget-friendly way to improve your braking capability. But I also did a whole series on brake fluid, on brake calipers, on brake rotors, and it's almost always talking about heat, heat, heat. So that's the second reason why you might want to do this, and that's why, again, you do see brakes getting bigger and bigger as they get aimed at higher and higher performance. Even these 6-piston calipers, one of the big reasons for the 6-piston calipers is a big honking pad in here. And you have all those pistons in the caliper to make sure the pad gets squeezed in smoothly or evenly across the whole thing, but mostly it's about that big pad. So that's what we're doing here, is we're looking at a progression of heat handling capability. The third thing is the feel. Now, there's a few aspects to feel on brakes. One is how squishy is the pedal. That's the one that's really reassuring. You don't want to be coming down into turn one, hit the brakes off the straight, and the pedal goes, and gets about halfway down, it's not a reassuring feeling. You don't want to have to hit the pedal and then it goes way down, then you hit it again because you've either boiled your brake fluid or you've got pad knockbacks, so your pads have moved away from the rotors. That's a very important one. A lot of feel comes down to making sure that feel in terms of that pedal firmness comes down to making sure that you have the right sizing in the pistons in your calipers and the right sizing in the piston in your master cylinder, because hydraulics is just basically a set of gears, set of levers, it's just ratios. You don't want to put on a caliper that has great big pistons that takes a lot of volume to move if you don't have that volume at the other end. So it's important to make sure things are matched. When we engineer brake kits, we design them to work with factory master cylinders, so you don't need to put a huge master cylinder on to match a 6-piston kit. We use smaller and smaller pistons depending on how many of them there are. But that is an important part of feel, is making sure you have that nice firm pedal. Another thing that leads to a nice firm pedal is a stiff caliper. Because you think about it, you're putting, honestly I don't remember what the actual numbers are, but you're putting as much pressure as you can, putting as much force as you can onto that brake pedal, and that force is being multiplied and squeezing the brake pads onto your rotor. Well, the caliper is the thing that's holding those in place. So if you have a caliper that's not stiff, it's going to open up and basically act as a spring, not reassuring. You put all that force on there, your force kind of goes away, you let off, it bounces back again, and you get into sort of a springy cycle. You're not going to enjoy that very much. So a stiff caliper goes a long way. And the other thing that comes another aspect of this, sort of the flip side, is the brake torque. And that is, for a given amount of force on the pedal, how much braking resistance, how much resistance is there to the turning, how much is it actually slowing the wheel. That's a place where you can mess with the hydraulic ratios a little bit, give up a little bit of pedal travel to get more force at the pads. But an easy way to do that is to simply increase the radius. It basically give it a longer arm to work on, longer lever. And that's another reason for big brake kits, is for a given amount of pedal force, you can get more stopping power simply because you're applying it further out, you have a longer lever. So that's another reason for a big brake kit. Now the downside to a big brake kit is weight. We need that mass. We want that mass for a reason. If you go really crazy on mass, you can actually start getting gyroscopic effects in your steering. I tested a brake kit years ago that used cut down Mustang GT rotors, and they were enormous, and they were all cast iron, and you could feel it. The steering didn't want to turn off center. It was the weirdest feel. So you'll notice that as we get bigger, we tend to go to 2-piece rotors. That allows us to put the mass where we need it, on the friction surface on the outside, and the center is lightweight aluminum to keep the overall mass down. Mass is also a problem when you're dealing with unsprung weight. Again, there's a video on this. We've been making weekly videos for a long time, so we've covered a lot of this stuff. But if you want to dive more into it, unsprung weight is basically how much weight is hanging off the end of your suspension. And if the more weight there is, the slower the suspension can react. That will dull your steering. It will dull your car's ability to deal with bumps, to deal with rough roads. So you don't want to hang any more weight off there than you have to. So that's the flip side. If you put on a big brake kit and you don't need it for stopping power, you may feel it in the way the car drives. You got to go both directions. So the way we've addressed this is we have a staged series of brake kits. We have stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, 4. I think it goes 1 through 5. And they're effectively, they work their way up the scale in terms of weight. They get heavier and heavier as they go, mostly. And also in terms of their aggressiveness, in terms of how much the effort they put into managing heat, how big they are, that sort of thing. We start off with the stage 1, which is effectively just use your factory parts, but better ones. It's good fluid, it's good pads, it's good rotors. It's basically optimizing your stock stuff. And the stages actually vary a little bit by chassis, so I recommend going to our website and actually looking at your particular chassis. But the next step we do is what we call our little big brake kit. And that's what we've got over here. It's a factory size rotor. You can actually use any factory rotor with them, especially the one exception is the NC rear. We go slightly bigger for reasons. But in most of the cars, it's a factory size rotor, and we put a nice light, stiff caliper on there. On the ND, for example, this can save 18 pounds of mass off your unsprung weight over all 4 wheels. And it's a very stiff little caliper, so as the ND in particular, you can really feel the effect this has on the brake pedal. This gives you a nice firm pedal. It gives you a lightweight caliper, gives you calipers very easy to change pads if you want to go run at the track and then come around here. And it gives you consumables that are inexpensive because that's just a factory rotor. You can find rotors for these things all over the place. It's a good starting point. And this is something that we came up with a number of years ago. And I think they've started showing up elsewhere, but this is an idea that came from Flyin Miata. The next step up is basically a big brake kit, and that is a 2-piece rotor on the front. Try to get rid of some of that mass on the front. We use a bigger caliper, bigger pads. It weighs a little bit more, but it can handle more heat. This is more the track option. The little big brake kit is maybe light track, autocross, good street use. That's what we use them for. This one is the one you would use for most track cars. The big brake kit, you've got more caliper in the front. It is bigger. It is still a stiff caliper. There's more pad material in there, bigger rotor. A little bit more expensive rotor because it's 2-piece. You need to, you can't just buy these things at any Napa when you have to buy a new ring. Luckily, they don't wear out that fast, but you do have to change them out depending on your pads. But it still maintains the ability to change pads easily, that sort of thing. The ultimate level that we have on the front is called the Big Mama Jama. And that is a great big 6-piston caliper, great big pad. The caliper is heavier, so again, we're adding more weight, but it's giving us that big pad. It's giving us the ability to put lots and lots of force into the pads. It's more difficult to change the pads because it has, you can't see if you come over here and have a look. I can't lift this thing up. They're all bolted together on a steel, so there's a big bridge in the middle of the pad. It makes the caliper much stiffer, which keeps it from getting springy. I've tried these calipers without that, and it was terrible. With this big bridge in the middle, it means that it is locked together, that it's much stiffer, feels much better, but it means you can't get the pads out as easily. So this is a compromise of better stiffness at the expense of more difficult maintenance, for example. In the rear, we do something similar. We have the rear of our little big brake kit is another lightweight, stiff caliper. It has a built-in parking brake on it that's not super strong. If you like handbrake turns, this is not the kit for you. If you want to pass SCCA tech inspection that says that you have to have a parking brake, technically you have a parking brake. Always leave it in gear. It's not a very effective parking brake, but it's there. But it's lightweight, it's nice and stiff, and again, this is what we use on, say, a 4-wheel kit. Very good feel on these, fantastic. Next step up with that is, this is for the NA and MB only at the moment, is these 2-piece ones, and that uses the same lightweight caliper as the primary caliper, but it adds a secondary one. And this grew out of Elvis, which is, if you've been out there, is the complete Hot Wheels, crazy-looking hill climb V8 Miata with like big wing and ridiculous tires, etc., etc. That competes in the Colorado hill climb series, which is dirt. And anyone who has driven hill climb sort of stuff knows the easiest way to get them to rotate is yank the handbrake. So this allows you to use a hydraulic handbrake with a lightweight caliper on the back. Overall weight savings, not much compared to stock, but you've got that hydraulic handbrake for really quick actuation. If you are a drifter, this is your setup. If you are a hill climber with a V8 Miata, Matt, this is your setup. And this was made specifically because Matt needed it for his car. We also have a version that uses a mechanical parking brake that is more effective than the one that's in here. So this one actually gives you a real legitimate parking brake to go along with the lightweight caliper and the easy change pads, etc. There's also an electronic version of these that's we don't sell it, but you can actually put an electronic caliper on here for an electric parking brake if you really want to have some fun. If you do that, send us pictures, we want to see it. But it mounts to the same bracket, so it could go on there. I'm hoping someone gives that a try because I think it'd be a cool thing. And that is effectively how things go through. When you are choosing brakes, take that into consideration. Are you looking for minimum stopping distance? Are you looking for maximum heat capacity? Are you looking for the best feel, the most deceleration for a given amount of pedal force? What are your priorities? And we'd be happy to help you choose. If you call us up or buttonhole one of us here this weekend, feel free to just say, hey, here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm using it for, here's what I'd like to do. What are the best options for me? It's not always the biggest and shiniest and reddest option. Sometimes it is a little big brake kit, sometimes it's optimized factory stuff. We're happy to help you out with that, both in person and online at any time. Do we have any questions? So the question is basically, does ABS still work? Does anti-lock brake system still work with all these brake kits? And the answer is yes, if they have good fundamental balance. The anti-lock brake system is simply noticing that the wheel, one of the wheels is slowing faster than the others, or it has stopped moving, so it releases the brakes fine. It continues to do that. It works just fine. The one thing you've got to watch out for, if you radically change the bias in the braking system, such as put on a big brake kit on the front with very aggressive pads and leave the rear alone, it might trigger a little bit early. So I recommend keeping it balanced. But yes, they all do work with ABS. The actual sensors and things that are required are all built into the hubs, so that's not a problem. Same with stability control, same sort of thing, they will continue to function. Okay, so the question is, I have an ND and it has Brembos on it. When do I want to upgrade? The Brembos are very sexy. They're fairly heavy. That's one disadvantage to them, is they are heavy. So that's a situation, if you go to the little big brake kit, you'll drop a lot of weight. You'll really feel that in the pedal. One other advantage to the Willwood stuff is that the pads are available in an enormous number of options. Any brake manufacturer makes pads for Willwood calipers, especially ones that are just pure race guys. They will run different pads for you, so you can get the right pads for yours. You can also change them very easily, with the exception of this big boy. And also the Brembos are bulky. They don't fit over a lot of wheels. So just because of the way they work, they're an opposing piston caliper like this one, but for some reason they're very, very large. So you will have a bigger option of wheels available to you if you go with a Willwood-based setup. So the question is the parking brake on this little big brake kit, the one, the cable actuator, weaker than stock? And the answer is yes. As I said, this is one you would use if you're looking for the best feel, the lightest weight, and you're willing to sacrifice the parking brake strength for it. So if you're an autocrosser, for example, this is what I have on the back of my track car, because I don't really use the parking brake on it, but just in case I'm running in a class that requires a parking brake, or if I'm trying to load in a trailer or something. But yeah, it's definitely not as strong as stock. So that's why we created the other ones, because we just needed that extra strength. So the question is, we do sell rear-only kits, and why would we do that? Well, partly is because they're in the catalog already, and maybe you bought a front kit a while ago and you need to upgrade your rears. I mean, that's the best reason, I think, to do it. You could potentially, the 1.6 cars in particular have a lot of front bias. So one way you can get some of that back, even if you put a proportioning valve in that's just wide open, it doesn't really do any front to rear bias anymore, you can still have trouble locking those rear brakes, and so that's where you may have to improve the brake torque in the back. I mean, one easy way to do it is install a set of the later 1.8 brakes on the back. One way is to run much more aggressive pads in the back, which I don't like, because running different pads means you have different heat characteristics, so you might find your bias changing. Or you can put on a caliper that will generate more brake torque in the back only. Generally speaking, though, it's there because people who have bought, big shiny brakes on the front at some other time. So the question is about the electronic brake distribution. Does that turn off with the stability control? The answer is no. It's part of the ABS system. So as long as your ABS is working, and there should not be an ABS switch in your car, hopefully. I've made it go into default mode in the past, but yeah, you should not be able to turn off ABS, so it should continue to function all the time. So no problem there. What do I run on the Targa, and why did I choose it? The Targa Miata, which those who don't know, it's the Martini theme thing out there with the 500 horsepower V8 in it. That is our brake torture test bed. It runs the big Mama Jama stuff in the front. It runs this setup in the back with the power light caliper. The reason we do that is because I need as much heat capacity as I can possibly get on that car. It has enormous ducts on it, ducts that don't allow me to turn the wheels all the way to one side because they'll hit the wheels, but I need I don't spend a lot of time in the Walmart parking lot, so I don't really miss that. So for me, the biggest thing about that car is just heat. So I went with the biggest caliper we had, the biggest rotor we had, the best ventilation we have. I'm pumping 3-inch ducts in there. They run very high temperature capable brake fluid. Same with the pads, and on the rear, again, I went with the power light rear. And the reason is because this one sheds heat very well. It's not the biggest pad we have, but it does. That one has so much so much weight transfer under hard braking. The brakes in the rear aren't working that hard. But if you look at it, you'll see the rear calipers are pink. They were not originally pink; they were black. But they managed to get so hot they've burned the dye off the anodizing. which is why they're gray now, by the way. So we don't have dyes in them, so they don't do that anymore. But yeah, they've seen so much heat, they've actually changed color. So that's what's on that car, and that's why it just can put the hurt on brakes like you would not believe. That's the biggest brake we can fit inside those 15-inch wheels. I'm not willing to go to 17s at this time, so. Do we have any options for the NC with a better parking brake? And the answer is unfortunately no, we do not at this time. The multi-link suspensions in the rear of the NC and ND make packaging this very challenging. We're looking at it. We're trying to see, trying to slot it into the development process, trying to see if we can make it happen. But at the moment, the NCs, because they come with such big brakes from the factory, we use a slightly different setup. We use a larger diameter rotor in the back for the little big brake kit, and we actually don't use a two-piece rotor on those. We just use their big 11-inch rotors and just put better and better calipers on them. If you are very concerned about the NC rear brakes or the parking brake, I'd probably just stick with a front-only kit. So again, we're back to the handbrake on the little big brake kit. Yeah, how weak is it? If you're parking on a slope, put it in gear. It's hard enough if you get a good yank when I'm loading in a trailer and I stop on the ramp. It'll hold. Don't lean on the car. Yeah, it's a like I said, it's if the tech inspector asks if you have a handbrake, you say yes I do. See, and there you go. You've just passed tech. It's mostly, yeah. It's for emergencies only, and even then, it's got to be a big emergency. The question is drilled versus slotted versus, I guess, plain rotors, and when do you start seeing an effect? I did a whole video on just brake rotors. If anybody feels like passing the time in their hotel room or whatever, hopefully I answered a lot of this. But the short version is the purpose of the slots in these are to get rid of effectively the incandescent layer on the surface of the pad. They wipe it clean almost. Also, if there's any outgassing, which is more of an old school thing with older pads, as the pad gets hot and starts releasing gases, it allows the gases to escape, so they don't sort of act as a floating bearing between the pad and the rotor. That's the general idea behind that kind of thing. Slot or drilled holes, it's for looks. I mean, I'm sorry, Porsche owners, but there is no reason to drill your rotors. There's excellent reasons not to drill your rotors because they act as very good places for holes to start, or for cracks to start. They act as stress risers. So if you have a rotor that has been cast with the holes in it, not so bad. I suspect that's what Porsche does. There are no Miata rotors on the market that do that. We do not offer drilled rotors for that reason. They are basically a failure waiting to happen. The concept is the same. Give the gas somewhere to go, a little more surface area to help things cool. On a street car, it doesn't matter if you have slots or not. We offer both slotted and non-slotted versions of our Stage 1 kits, the factory stuff. You'll notice this one here, this little big brake kit, is currently sitting on a smooth, plain rotor. That'll work just fine for track use, for autocross use. The only time they start coming in is when you're really punishing with the heat, and even then, it's a little negligible. We can't get plain versions of some of these, that's why they have the slots. Yeah, they help a little bit. For most use, don't use that as your determining factor as what brakes to get, would be my suggestion. But don't get drilled rotors. Friends don't let friends drive drilled rotors. Okay, so there was a comment on a friend of yours is running big brake kit, and they're starting to see the slots wear away. The slots are getting more shallow, and what's really happening is the rest of the rotor is wearing away, and the slots are they're like the tread wear indicators on your tires. That's actually one benefit to slots, is you can do a quick visual check to see how your rotors are wearing. I used to run a particular pad on the Targa Miata it would always stop the car, literally in a hurricane, been there, done that. It would stop at Laguna Seca every single time, been there, done that, but it would destroy rotors. And I used to use the slots as indicator. When the slots went away, it was time for new rotors. What's happening is, the way that the pads work is you're ramming a carbon metallic or something, some sort of aggressive scrubbing compound directly onto a piece of iron, and you're wearing that iron away, you're wearing that pad away. That's what brake dust is. It's pieces of your rotor, it's pieces of your pads. Generally, pads wear faster than rotors, but depending on your setup, depending on whether you're overheating the pads, depending on the number of factors, you will eventually wear away those rotors, and the slots give you an indication of what's going on there. So if they disappear and you had them before, it's time for new rotors usually. Okay, well, I'm going to call that good because I've been yammering on for about 45 minutes about this. If you do have questions about your specific needs, your specific wants, feel free to buttonhole any one of us. There's a whole bunch of us here to help you out to answer questions. Thanks for your attention, folks.